Chapter 1. The crystal chandeliers at the Plaza Hotel were too bright. They made the champagne in Seo Jun's hand look like liquid gold, but it tasted like vinegar. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time, his fingers trembling. He wasn't built for this. The noise, the fake smiles, the way the men in expensive suits looked at him like he was a decorative vase Jun had picked up on a whim. "Stay close, Junnie," Jae-won whispered, his hand heavy on Jun's lower back. "And for God's sake, look like you're enjoying yourself. You're making me look boring." Jun tried. He really did. He loved Jae-won, or he thought he did. He loved the way Jae-won had swept into his quiet life and promised him the world. He just didn't realize the world Jae-won lived in was built on broken glass. The gala was a charity event, but everyone knew it was a neutral ground for the families that ran the East Coast. Jae-won was a rising star in his syndicate, and tonight was his coming-out party. The shift happened near the bar. A group of men, younger and louder than the rest, surrounded Jae-won. Among them was a man named Leo, the son of a high-ranking lieutenant. He was everything Jun wasn't, sharp-tongued, wearing a suit that cost more than Jun's college tuition, and looking at Jae-won with hungry eyes. "Is this the one, Jae?" Leo laughed, gesturing to Jun with a flick of his cigar. "The little librarian you've been hiding?" Jae-won didn't defend him. He didn't even look at Jun. He just took a long sip of his scotch. "He's quiet. Keeps the bed warm." The sting in Jun's chest was physical. He stepped back, his face burning. "Jun, can we go?" Jae-won finally looked at him, but his eyes were cold. He wanted to show these men he wasn't soft. He wanted to prove he could discard anything to get ahead. "You're so sensitive, Jun." "It's exhausting," Jae-won said, his voice loud enough to catch the attention of the nearby tables. Then he did it. Jae-won reached out, grabbed Leo by the back of the neck, and pulled him into a hard, messy kiss. Right there. In front of the cameras. In front of the most powerful people in the city. The room didn't go silent. It erupted in whistles and cheers. It was a power move. A statement that Jae-won did whatever he wanted, with whoever he wanted. Jun stood frozen. His photographic memory, usually a gift, became a curse. He saw the way Jae-won's eyes stayed open, watching Jun to see the impact. He saw the smirk on Leo's face against Jae-won's lips. He saw the red wine stain on the white tablecloth next to him. The gift Jun had been holding, a small gold watch he'd saved 6 months of wages to buy for Jae-won's promotion, felt heavy in his pocket. Like a stone. "Get him out of here," Jae-won said, breaking the kiss and wiping his mouth, looking at Jun with utter disgust. "He's ruining the vibe. Go home, Jun. I'll have someone drop your boxes at your sister's place tomorrow." Jun didn't cry. Not yet. He just turned around and walked. He walked past the flashing cameras, past the whispers of, "Poor thing," and "He never belonged here anyway." He stepped out into the freezing New York air without a coat. He had nothing. No home, no boyfriend, and no dignity left. As he stood on the curb, gasping for air that felt like needles in his lungs, a black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down slowly. A man sat in the back, shrouded in shadows. All Jun could see were his eyes, steady, observant, and strangely calm. "Seo Jun?" the man asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the city noise like a blade. Jun hugged his arms to his chest. "Who are you?" "My name is Kang Tae-hyun," the man said. "Your father's debt has come due. Get in the car." Jun looked back at the hotel, where the muffled sound of Jae-won's laughter echoed through the glass. He looked at the man in the car. He didn't have a choice. He opened the door and stepped into the dark. Chapter 2. The interior of the SUV smelled like expensive leather and something faint, like sandalwood and rain. It was a sharp contrast to the smell of spilled scotch and cheap perfume at the gala. Jun sat as far away from the man as possible, his back pressed against the door. He was still shivering, his breath hitching every few seconds. He felt small. He felt like a piece of trash that had been kicked to the curb and then picked up by a different, more dangerous passerby. The man, Tae-hyun, didn't look at him. He was looking at a tablet, his thumb scrolling slowly. He looked like a businessman, not a monster. But in this city, the businessmen were the ones who ordered the hits. "I didn't know about a debt," Jun said, his voice cracking. He hated how weak he sounded. Taehyun finally looked up. His eyes were dark, but they weren't mean. They were just still. Your father has a talent for losing things that aren't his. He used your family's business as collateral. When that ran out, he used his connection to the Min family, your ex-boyfriend's family. Jun felt a sick twist in his stomach. Jae-won knew. Jae-won was the one who sold the debt to us, Taehyun said calmly. He didn't want the burden of a useless partner who came with a price tag. He traded you for a shipping route in the north. The air left Jun's lungs. He thought about the watch in his pocket again. He'd skipped meals to buy that. He'd stayed up late helping Jae-won with his reports, which were really just logs of illegal transactions. He had given everything to a man who had literally traded him like a used car. Where are you taking me? Jun whispered. Are you going to kill me? Taehyun actually paused at that. He turned his body slightly toward Jun. If I wanted you dead, you would have stayed on that sidewalk. My syndicate doesn't work like the Min family. We don't throw away assets. We use them. I'm an asset now? You're a bridge, Taehyun corrected. The Kangs and the Mints have been at each other's throats for a decade. A political marriage, a public one, signals a truce. It stabilizes the market. You are the face of that stability. The car pulled into a long, gated driveway in the suburbs. It wasn't a dark fortress. It was a beautiful, modern house with floor-to-ceiling windows. It looked peaceful. It looked like a lie. Taehyun stepped out of the car and waited. He didn't grab Jun. He didn't yell. He just stood there in the cold, waiting for Jun to move on his own. When Jun finally stepped out, his legs gave way. The shock of the night, the betrayal, the cold, the sheer terror, finally caught up to him. He stumbled, his knees hitting the gravel. He expected a laugh. He expected a kick. That's what Jae-won's friends would have done. Instead, he saw a pair of polished black shoes stop inches from his hands. The gravel is sharp, Taehyun said. He didn't reach down to pull Jun up. He held out a hand, palm up. An invitation. You can stay down there and bleed, or you can get up and come inside where it's warm. It's your choice, Jun. For the first time tonight, someone is giving you a choice. Jun looked at that hand. It was steady. No rings, no blood, just clean skin. He reached out and took it. Taehyun's grip was firm but surprisingly light. He didn't squeeze. He just helped Jun find his balance. Inside, the house was silent. A fire was already crackling in a large stone fireplace. There's a room upstairs. Second door on the left, Taehyun said, shedding his overcoat. Underneath, he wore a charcoal vest that hugged his broad shoulders. There are clothes in the closet. They should fit. Eat something. We'll talk about the rules tomorrow. Jun stood in the middle of the expensive rug, feeling like a stain on the decor. Why are you being like this? Taehyun stopped at the foot of the stairs. He looked back, his expression unreadable. Like what? Gentle, Jun said the word like it was a foreign language. Taehyun's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Don't mistake fight for gentle, Seo Jun. I am a very violent man. I just don't see the point in wasting effort on someone who is already broken. Go to bed. Jun watched him walk away. He went to the room Taehyun had pointed out. Inside, on the bed, was a set of soft, silk pajamas and a glass of water. He stripped off his ruined suit, the one Jae-won had picked out because it made Jun look meek. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold watch. He looked at it for a long time before shoving it into the very back of the nightstand drawer. He didn't want to see it again. As he lay under the heavy, warm blankets, he expected to have nightmares about the gala. But instead, his mind kept replaying the way Taehyun's hand felt. It was the only thing in the last 5 hours that hadn't hurt him. Chapter 3. The morning light was a cold, unforgiving gray. It spilled across the high-thread count sheets of the guest room, making Seo Jun's head throb. For a few seconds, he forgot where he was. He reached out his arm, expecting to feel the empty side of the bed in the apartment he'd shared with Jae-won. Then, the memory of the gala, the kiss, the laughter, the black SUV, hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. He sat up too fast, his vision blurring. He was wearing the silk pajamas. They felt too soft against his skin, a luxury he hadn't earned. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He wasn't sure if it was from the cold or the realization that his life was no longer his own. He found his way downstairs by the smell of coffee. The house was even more intimidating in the daylight. It was all sharp angles, glass, and expensive art that looked like it was meant to be admired, not touched. Just like the man sitting at the long marble kitchen island. Tae-hyun was dressed in a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were lean and corded with muscle. He was reading a physical newspaper, a black coffee steaming beside him. He didn't look up when Jun entered the room, but he spoke. "The eggs are in the warmer. You look like a ghost." Jun hovered near the doorway. "I'm not hungry." Tae-hyun folded the paper slowly. The sound of the crisp pages felt loud in the silence. He looked at Jun, his gaze sweeping over his messy hair and puffy eyes. "In this house, we don't skip meals. You're thin enough as it is. Sit." It wasn't a request. Jun sat. He picked at the eggs. They were perfect, but they tasted like cardboard. He kept waiting for the catch. With Jae-won, every nice gesture came with a price. "I bought you dinner, so you have to stay late at the club with my friends. I got you those shoes, so don't complain when I don't come home for 2 days. What do you want from me?" Jun asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tae-hyun set his coffee down. "I told you. Stability. A public face. The city thinks the Kangs are monsters who only know how to burn things down. Having a fiancé who looks like you, softens that image. It makes people think we're interested in peace. And what do I have to do? Pretend to love you?" Tae-hyun's lips didn't move, but something in his eyes shifted. "I don't care about love, Jun. I find it messy and unreliable. You've seen what it did to you last night. Why would you want to repeat that?" Jun looked down at his plate. The logic was cold, but it was honest. "You'll have your own floor," Tae-hyun continued, his voice dropping into that low, vibrato-heavy tone that made the hair on Jun's neck stand up. "You'll have a budget for whatever you need. In return, you attend the events I choose. You stand by my side. You don't talk to the mints. And you never, under any circumstances, lie to me. That's it. That's it." Just then, the heavy front door opened. A man in a dark suit walked in, looking agitated. He stopped when he saw Jun. "Boss, we have a problem at the docks. One of Jae-won's guys is..." Tae-hyun didn't even turn around. He just raised one finger. The man went silent instantly. "Not here, Min-ho," Tae-hyun said softly. "I'm having breakfast with my fiancé." The word fiancé sent a shiver down Jun's spine. It sounded like a threat and a promise all at once. Tae-hyun stood up, his height suddenly overwhelming the kitchen. He walked over to where Jun was sitting. Jun flinched instinctively, drawing his shoulders in. He expected a hand to grab his chin, to force him to look up. But Tae-hyun stopped 2 feet away. He reached out, his hand hovering near Jun's face for a second before he tucked a stray lock of hair behind Jun's ear. He didn't actually touch the skin, but Jun could feel the heat radiating from his fingers. "I'm going to work," Tae-hyun said. "The house is yours. Don't go outside without a guard. Not because you're a prisoner, but because Jae-won is the type of man who hates to see his trash being polished by someone else. Do you understand?" Jun nodded, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Good." Tae-hyun turned to the man in the suit. "Now, tell me about the docks. If they touched our shipment, I want their fingers." He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. He just walked out, leaving Jun alone in the sunlight. Jun stared at the spot where Tae-hyun had been. He realized then why they called him the Quiet Devil. It wasn't because he was loud or cruel. It was because he was so calm that you forgot he could kill you with his bare hands. And for some reason, for the first time in years, Jun felt like he could finally breathe. Chapter 4. The next 3 days were the quietest of Seo Jun's life. In Jae-won's world, silence was always the preamble to a scream or a crash. Here, the silence was heavy, but it didn't feel like a trap. Jun spent most of his time in the library. His photographic memory was a restless thing. If he didn't feed it new information, it would loop the image of Jae-won's kiss at the gala over and over. So he read. He memorized the spines of the leather-bound books, the pattern of the Persian rug, and the exact way the light hit the oak desk at 4 p.m. On the fourth evening, a heavy folder was left on the dining table. Next to it was Tae-hyun, looking exhausted. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his tie was pulled loose. The contract, Tae-hyun said, gesturing to the folder. Read it. If there's something you hate, we change it. Jun sat across from him, the wood of the table cold against his palms. He opened the folder. It wasn't full of legal jargon. It was a list of bullet points. No physical contact is required in private. Public displays of affection are limited to hand-holding or a hand on the waist. Seo Jun will have access to his own bank account, untraceable by the Min family. Monthly visits to Jun's sister will be supervised for safety, but private. Jun looked up. You're giving me an allowance? And let me see my sister? You're a partner, not a prisoner, Tae-hyun said, his voice raspy. He reached for his coffee, then realized it was empty. He sighed, a sound so human it made Jun's heart stutter. Jae-won kept you on a leash by limiting your resources. I'm giving you a cage with an open door. You'll find you're much less likely to run if you know you actually can. Jun turned to the last page. There was a space for his signature, but there was one more rule at the bottom, handwritten in sharp, elegant script. Nothing happens without a yes. What does this mean? Jun asked, pointing to the line. Tae-hyun leaned back, his eyes fixed on Jun's. It means exactly what it says. If we are at a gala and I need to put my arm around you to keep up appearances, I will ask. If you say no, I'll find another way. I don't take things, Jun. I only accept what is offered. Jun felt a lump in his throat. He thought of all the times Jae-won had shoved him into a car, or pulled him into a room, or forced him to smile when he was crying inside. Why are you doing this? Jun whispered. You're a mafia boss. You're supposed to be the one who takes. I have enough enemies in the streets, Tae-hyun said, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous hum. I don't want one in my bed. Or in my home. If you're going to be by my side, I want you there because you feel safe, not because you're afraid. Tae-hyun stood up to leave, but as he passed Jun, his foot caught on the edge of the rug. It was a small, clumsy moment. The first uncoordinated thing Jun had seen him do. Tae-hyun reached out to steady himself on the back of Jun's chair. Jun flinched. He ducked his head, his hands flying up to cover his ears, waiting for the blow or the bark of a laugh at his weakness. The blow never came. The room stayed silent. Jun slowly lowered his hands. Tae-hyun was standing a few feet away, having completely pulled back. He didn't look annoyed. He looked something else. Pain? Guilt? It was gone before Jun could name it. I'm sorry, Jun breathed, his face heating up. I just. Don't apologize for what he did to you, Tae-hyun said. He didn't come closer. He stayed in the shadows of the hallway. It will take time for your body to realize you're not in danger. I'm a patient man, Jun. I've spent years waiting for the right moment to take down my enemies. I can wait for you to stop flinching. He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading as he headed toward his office. Jun sat alone with the contract. He picked up a pen. His hand was still shaking, but for the first time, it wasn't because of the man in the room with him. It was because he realized that for the last 2 years, he had been starving, and Tae-hyun was the first person to offer him a seat at the table. He signed his name at the bottom. The ink was black and bold. As he closed the folder, he realized he had forgotten to memorize the last page. He didn't need to. The only words that mattered were the ones Tae-hyun had written by hand. Nothing happens without a yes. Jun walked to the window and looked out at the dark New York skyline. Somewhere out there, Jae-won was probably laughing, thinking he'd won. He had no idea that by throwing Jun away, he'd handed him the only thing Jun had ever truly wanted, a choice. Chapter 5. Safety didn't sound like a choir of angels or some grand movie soundtrack. For Seo Jun, safety sounded like the low, rhythmic hum of the refrigerator in the middle of the night and the soft thud of Tae-hyun's heavy boots hitting the floor in the mudroom every evening at 7 p.m. 2 weeks had passed. The bruises on Jun's ego were still there, but the ones on his soul were starting to scab over. He was in the kitchen, experimenting with a recipe for a simple beef stew. He didn't have to cook, Taehyun had staff for that, but the staff usually left by 6 o'clock, and Jun found that working with his hands kept the memory loops at bay. In the quiet of the kitchen, he didn't have to remember the way the gala lights reflected off the tears on his cheeks. He only had to remember the exact timing for adding the carrots. The front door opened. The boots hit the floor. Jun didn't jump this time. He just stirred the pot. Taehyun walked into the kitchen. He'd ditched the suit jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from carrying the weight of 1,000 secrets. He stopped at the island watching Jun. "It smells like a home in here," Taehyun said. His voice was gravelly, a little raw. "I'm not used to that." "It's just stew," Jun said, though his heart did a little tripwire skip. "You're late. I thought maybe something happened." "Business," Taehyun said shortly. He didn't elaborate. He never brought the blood home. "But I'm here now." Taehyun moved to the cupboard to grab a glass, but he paused. He looked at the row of mugs. He seemed to be debating which one to take. "The blue one," Jun said without looking up. "On the second shelf. It's the only one that isn't chipped, and the handle fits your hand better." Taehyun stopped. He looked at the blue mug, then at Jun. "How did you know that?" "I remember things," Jun said, finally meeting his eyes. "You used that mug 3 nights ago. You held it with your left hand because your right one was stiff from writing. You liked the weight of it." Taehyun stared at him for a long beat. It wasn't the way Jae-won used to stare, like he was checking a mirror. Taehyun looked at Jun like he was a puzzle he was finally starting to solve. "You're a dangerous man to have around, Seo Jun," Taehyun murmured, though there was a ghost of a smile on his face. "Nothing gets past you." "Is that a bad thing?" "No," Taehyun said, stepping closer. He respected the 2-foot boundary, but the air between them felt thick, charged with something that wasn't fear. "It's nice. Being seen. Truly seen." A sudden crack of thunder shook the house. Outside, the New York sky had finally opened up, a torrential downpour slamming against the glass. The lights flickered, hummed, and then died. The kitchen went pitch black. Jun gasped, his breath hitching. In the dark, the memories tried to claw their way back in. The dark was where Jae-won used to hide his worst moods. The dark was where the shouting happened. Jun felt his knees go weak. He reached out, his hands searching for the edge of the counter, but he missed. Before he could fall, he felt a presence. A warmth. "Jun," Taehyun's voice was right there. Steady. A lighthouse in the black. "I'm right here. I'm not moving." "I can't. I don't like the dark," Jun whispered, his voice small and broken. "I know. Just breathe." Taehyun didn't grab him. Even in the dark, he remembered the rule. Jun could feel Taehyun's hand hovering just inches from his shoulder. He could feel the heat of it. "Can I?" Taehyun asked. Just 2 words. "Can I?" Jun swallowed hard. "Yes." Taehyun's hand landed on his shoulder. It was heavy, grounding. It wasn't a grip, it was an anchor. Then, slowly, Taehyun pulled him forward until Jun's forehead rested against Taehyun's chest. Jun could hear it then. Taehyun's heartbeat. It was slow. Thump thump. Thump thump. It was the most beautiful thing Jun had ever heard. He let out a long, shuddering breath and leaned in. He wrapped his arms around Taehyun's waist, burying his face in the scent of sandalwood and rain. For the first time in his life, Jun wasn't holding on for dear life. He was just holding on. "You're safe," Taehyun whispered into his hair. He didn't say, "I love you." He didn't say, "You're mine." He just told the truth. "I've got the doors locked, Jun. Nobody is coming in here to hurt you. Not tonight. Not ever." The lights buzzed back to life a minute later, flooding the kitchen with a warm, yellow glow. They stayed like that for a second too long, both of them realizing that the contract didn't cover the way their hearts were currently racing. Jun pulled back, his face flushed, but he didn't look away. Taehyun cleared his throat, his hand lingering on Jun's arm for a fraction of a second before dropping. "The stew," he said, nodding toward the stove. It's going to burn. Jun turned back to the pot, his hands shaking, but this time, it was a different kind of tremor. As he served the bowls, he realized that he wasn't just a bridge or an asset anymore. He was someone who knew which mug a monster liked. And the monster was someone who asked permission before he saved him from the dark. But as they sat down to eat, a vibration came from the counter. Taehyun's work phone. Taehyun picked it up, his expression hardening instantly back into the mask of the underboss. He looked at the screen, then at Jun. "What is it?" Jun asked, the warmth in his stomach turning to ice. "Jae-won," Taehyun said, his voice cold. "He's calling a meeting. He says he wants to renegotiate the shipping routes. And he's demanding that his former property be present to witness the signing." The spoon in Jun's hand felt like lead. The past wasn't just knocking on the door. It was trying to break it down. Chapter 6. The private lounge at the St. Regis was silent, save for the low hum of the air conditioning. It was a room designed for deals that never saw the light of day. Seo Jun sat next to Taehyun at a long mahogany table. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, highlighting the fact that he'd actually put on a little weight, healthy weight, over the last few weeks. He didn't look like the shivering boy on the sidewalk anymore. Across from them, Min Jae-won looked like a man who was losing his grip. His hair was a little too messy, his eyes bloodshot. Beside him sat Leo, looking bored and picking at his cuticles. "Well, Jun," Han said, his voice straining for its usual flirtatious edge. It fell flat. "I see the Kangs are taking care of my property." Taehyun's hand was on the table, inches from Jun's. It didn't move, but the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He's not property, Jae-won. And he's not yours. Let's get to the routes." For 20 minutes, they talked numbers. Or rather, Taehyun talked, and Jae-won tried to keep up. It was clear that without Jun's quiet help with the reports, Jae-won was drowning in the logistics of his own business. He kept stumbling over figures, getting frustrated. "Enough of this." Jae-won finally slammed his hand on the table. He looked at Jun, his eyes wild. "Jun, come on. This has gone far enough. You've had your little revenge. You've stayed in this ice palace long enough. Tell him you're coming back. I'll settle the debt. I'll double it." Jun looked at Jae-won. His photographic memory flickered. He saw the gala. He saw the kiss. He saw the countless nights he'd waited up with a cold dinner while Jae-won was out, networking. But then he looked at Taehyun. He remembered the blue mug. He remembered the hand hovering in the dark, asking for permission. "I remember everything, Jae-won," Jun said. His voice was steady. It was the loudest he had ever spoken in a room full of men. "I remember the way you looked at me like I was a burden. I remember the way you tasted like Leo's gin when you finally came home that night. And I remember the way you sold me to a rival because you thought I was worth less than a shipping route." Jae-won flinched. "Junnie." "I'm not Junnie," Jun interrupted. He felt a strange, light sensation in his chest. The ghost that had been haunting him for years was finally evaporating. "I'm the man who knows your books better than you do. I'm the man who knows you're actually short on the north side margins by 15%. And I'm the man who is staying right here." Jae-won turned to Taehyun, his face purple with rage. "You think he loves you? He's a scared kid. He's only with you because he's terrified." Taehyun stood up. He didn't loom, he just existed with a gravity that Jae-won could never match. He reached out and, for the first time in public, he took Jun's hand. He didn't squeeze. He just held it. "He's free to walk out that door right now," Taehyun said softly. "The debt is settled. The contracts are signed. Jun is a free man." The room went dead silent. Jae-won stared, waiting for Jun to stand up and run to him. Jun didn't move. He squeezed Taehyun's hand back. "I'm staying," Jun said, looking Jae-won in the eye. "Not because I have to, but because for the first time in my life, I'm in a room where I don't have to be afraid of the silence." Taehyun led him out of the lounge before Jae-won could find his breath. They walked through the lobby, past the flashing lights of the city, and into the back of the SUV. As the car pulled away, the tension finally broke. Jun leaned his head back against the leather seat and closed his eyes. "You didn't have to tell him about the margins," Tae-hyun said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I wanted him to know exactly what he lost, Jun murmured. He opened his eyes and looked at Tae-hyun. The underboss was watching him, his expression softer than Jun had ever seen it. You meant it? About the debt being settled. Every word, Tae-hyun said. You don't owe me anything, Jun. Not a signature. Not a seat at my table. Nothing. Jun reached out, hesitating for a second, then placed his hand over Tae-hyun's. Then I'd like to renegotiate the contract. Tae-hyun raised an eyebrow. Oh. Rule 1, Jun said, a small, genuine smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. No more assets or bridges. Just Jun and Tae-hyun. Tae-hyun turned his hand over, interlacing their fingers. I think I can agree to that. And Rule 2? Tae-hyun asked. Jun leaned in, closing the gap until their shoulders touched. The scent of sandalwood and rain was everywhere, and for once, it didn't feel like a storm was coming. It felt like home. Rule 2, Jun whispered, is that you have to let me cook that stew again tomorrow. I think I finally memorized the perfect amount of salt. Tae-hyun laughed, a short, rare sound that filled the car. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to the top of Jun's head. It wasn't for a camera. It wasn't for a deal. It was just because he wanted to. Yes, Tae-hyun said. Everything is a yes from now on. As the SUV merged into the sea of New York taillights, Seo Jun finally let go of the past. He didn't need to memorize it anymore. He had something better to focus on, a future that he had finally, bravely, chosen for himself. The city outside was still a place of iron and blood, but inside the brownstone on the edge of the park, the air felt different. It was 6 months since the meeting at the St. Regis, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it had finally begun. Epilogue. The Gold Watch. Seo Jun was cleaning out the nightstand in the guest room, the room he hadn't actually slept in for months. He was moving the last of his things into the master suite, where the pillows smelled like Taehyun's cologne and the silence was always shared. At the very back of the drawer, his fingers brushed against cold metal. He pulled it out. The gold watch. He looked at it for a long time. This was the object that had represented his entire worth in his old life. A sacrifice made for a man who didn't even remember his middle name. 6 months ago, looking at this would have made his chest tighten with shame. But it just looked like a piece of jewelry that ran a little too fast. You're still holding on to that? Jun didn't flinch at the voice. He turned to see Tae-hyun leaning against the doorframe. He was dressed for a gala, black suit, silk tie, but his posture was relaxed, his eyes soft. He looked like a man who was home, not a man on duty. I found it while packing, Jun said, holding the watch up. I was thinking about how much I used to care about it. Tae-hyun walked into the room, closing the distance between them. He didn't stop 2 feet away anymore. He stepped right into Jun's space and reached out, his thumb tracing the line of Jun's jaw. And now it's just a watch, Jun said. He walked over to the open window and, without a second thought, let it go. He didn't look down to see where it landed in the garden below. He didn't need to. Tae-hyun let out a quiet, huffed laugh. I could have gotten you a better one, you know. Platinum. Diamonds. I don't want to watch, Tae-hyun, Jun said, reaching up to straighten the other man's tie. I like knowing what time it is just by looking at how the light hits your desk. I like that my time belongs to me now. Tae-hyun's expression shifted, that fierce, protective look entering his eyes, the one he only ever showed to Jun. He leaned down, resting his forehead against Jun's. We have to leave for the opera in 10 minutes, Tae-hyun whispered. The mints will be there. They'll see us together. Let them look, Jun replied, his voice firm. Let them see that I'm not a bridge anymore. I'm exactly where I want to be. Tae-hyun didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just leaned in and kissed Jun. A slow, deep breath of a kiss that tasted like safety. It wasn't a performance for a camera or a power move for the syndicate. It was a choice. As they walked out of the house together, hand in hand, Jun didn't look back. His photographic memory was full of new things now. The way Tae-hyun looked when he was sleeping, the sound of the rain against their windows, and the feeling of a hand that held his not because it owned him, but because it never wanted to let him go. The dark was still there, but Jun wasn't afraid of it anymore. He had his own light now. If you felt that heart-thumping tension between Jun and Taehyun, make sure to hit that like button. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing someone find their worth after being treated like property, right? But I want to hear from you. Did you enjoy the quiet protector vibe of Taehyun? Or are you still waiting for the moment Jae-won gets what's coming to him in a sequel? Let me know in the comments below. We post new, emotionally driven BL stories every week, from dark mafia romances to soft, healing heartbreaks. If you don't want to miss the next safe haven story, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Stay soft, stay brave, and I'll see you in the next story.